USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Learn more and get a quote at usaa.com/bundle. Restrictions apply.
Introducing the new Volvo XC90 with 7-seat versatility, Google built-in, and advanced safety features for all your precious cargo. The new Volvo XC90, designed for life. Visit volvocars.com/US to learn more.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Underrated Movie Podcast. This is a podcast where we discuss films that are underrated, underappreciated, and ones that have flown under the radar and passed most people by. I am your host, Derick McDuff, and today we are going to be discussing Edgar Wright's 2021 film Last Night in Soho, starring Thomasin McKenzie and Anya Taylor-Joy. Joining me is the co-host of Nothing and a future and past co-panelist at a few conventions with me. How's it going, Andrew?
It's going great. I'm glad to be here. Glad to be talking about probably Edgar Wright's most underrated film.
Yeah, I think that would be... I think that I would agree with that. You know, we were kind of like talking before we started recording, and we're like, yeah, you know, like, this is a movie we both like. Not everyone agrees with that. And that's something that I remember when I saw the movie. The person that I saw it with did not love it. And we had a, long discussion about it. But, before we get too far into that, what do you want to let the people know about yourself and your podcast?
You can check out Nothing New, a remake podcast. Every month we talk about film remakes. Our current episode, well, by the time this comes out, there might be something else out, but it's Karate Kid, because, of course, Karate Kid Legends came out, which combines the two timelines of the remake with Jackie Chan and the original with Ralph Macchio, which is kind of a funny thing that we have not really seen happen in remakes. So that's going to be a really good episode. I'm really excited for that one.
Nice, looking forward to that.
We have quite a backlog going from, current remakes to ones of very old movies. Like Brewster's Millions is one that I like to bring up because not everyone knows that was like a movie from the 40s before it was remade in the 80s. So yeah, check that out wherever you get your podcasts. It comes out every month.
Yeah, it's definitely good stuff. Looking forward to that Karate Kid episode. But yeah, a movie that I don't think is going to get remade anytime soon is the one we're talking about here, Last Night in Soho. And when after we did the WonderCon panel together, and I'll say we're what I was alluding to earlier is we're going to be soon doing the Comic-Con panel. So that's coming out. That'll be out in a week. So we can officially say that now by the time this episode is dropped. We're kicking around some ideas I've got to get you on at some point. And one of the ideas he had was Last Night in Soho. And like I said, that's a movie that I was very much defending, having real life discussions with people about. I was like, good, then it'll be perfect to cover on the podcast. Why was this one of the ones you wanted to talk about, that you feel that this movie is so underrated?
I think, I think Edgar Wright is one of these filmmakers that is very well known for specific things, which is in nerd culture, especially, he did Scott Pilgrim.
Right.
And then there's the Cornetto trilogy, Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz. And it's Hot Fuzz is one of my favorite movies ever.
Same here.
I think even like Shaun of the Dead, people say that like changed their life. These are big movies, especially in people who love movies and people who I think he's of.
They're big on Letterboxd. Let's just say that.
And Edgar Wright is a younger filmmaker, so I think he speaks to like a younger audience. The references that he's making, and so the way that his films look, and so it really drew people in. And I think, and this is his most recent film, Last Night in Soho, I forgot that it was really the last feature that he did.
Yeah.
And I think it didn't resonate with that audience. I think it really didn't. And that's why it's underrated, because I think people were expecting something completely different out of it. And I enjoyed it for what it is. I'm not putting on any kind of like, oh, it should have been this, it should have been that. I'm like, no, it came in, it did what it wanted to do, and I had a fun time watching it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this too. I think it's another case of something that I come across a lot on this podcast, where it was something that was mismarketed, right? It's a movie that comes out, and I think it gets played, like the trailers make it seem like a more kind of by the numbers horror flick, like almost like maybe even a slasher film or something like that, where it's like this very psychological thriller type thing. Or I think people were expecting a more like, people who are familiar with the Cornetto trilogy or something like that, or Scott Pilgrim, were expecting to be more like that film or those films. Whereas it's definitely doing something different. It's a lot. I mean, there's funny beats in it, but it's not like nearly as funny as any of those movies. It's not even as funny as Baby Driver, I don't think, but it still has that signature Wright style that has really defined a lot of his films, with this sleek camera movement, the kind of whip pans, the great soundtracks, the way that things are perfectly synced up to a sound effect or to just a drum beat in a song, things like that.
The editing, is so smooth. It's where, honestly, like, I'll enjoy watching his films just because I'm like, I'm in good hands. Like, I'm not going to be worried about if there's a fight scene, it's not cut badly. Like, you know what I'm talking about. There's so many action movies where during a fight scene, you have no idea what's going on.
Yes, exactly. This is definitely one of the best looking movies around. And it's that old adage of, like, if you look at the movies that win best editing, a lot of time at the Oscars, people are always like, what, really? Like, this movie won best editing? I think a lot of times it's like editing is only really noticeable when it's not that good. So you won't always notice that this movie is edited that well, or how good it looks. And this movie just looks phenomenal. I think there's very few things that look this good. It really plays into like the kind of psychedelic swinging 60s in a way that I think is, it starts kind of like, ooh, this is cool, but becomes very, very unnerving very quickly.
Yeah, I think, and you mentioned Baby Driver, which is a film that I also love. I mean, I think I love Edgar Wright's movies more than any other director's movies, but
okay, nice.
And the Baby Driver, I think Edgar Wright hit a stride here of where he's really playing with music in movies. Baby Driver is so specifically, the songs are what pushes that movie along. And then you look at now Last Night in Soho, and it's all rooted in the songs of the 60s to the point of it literally transports this girl back into the 60s.
Yes, and that's one thing I think that is so integral in this movie, is the way that nostalgia is kind of a core theme of the movie, and how nostalgia can be incredibly dangerous. And the way that it uses, I think, music as one of the main tent poles of describing that, because, I mean, not to knock people who like listen to vinyl, I'm sure it's cool, but like, you see all these people who are like, oh, music was so much better back then, and I only listen to vinyl, and I can't listen to that whole, like, it's just, we're looking back to the past and how great the past is. And that's something that, this main character, played by Thomasin McKenzie, is very much doing. Ellie is like, oh wow, yeah, Soho, like the 60s is so cool, and she starts having these visions of this great beauty in the 60s. And when she starts actually, like, and at first it's really cool, it seems really cool, and the more and more she gets into it, the more she realizes, like, oh no, being in the 60s, especially a woman in the 60s, is a fucking absolute nightmare. And this
Yeah.
nostalgia that we've been like thinking, oh, it's so great, and I think that's something that's really like certain presidents have made that their whole campaign about nostalgia and making things great again. It's a very, very dangerous thing because we're imagining this great time and the way that these things used to be. And I think that's something Back to the Future, for example, also does really well. But then if you stop and look at the reality, it's actually terrifying and horrific.
Mm-hmm. I think the way this plays out in Last Night in Soho is really kind of funny because the first dream sequence where Ellie meets Sandy she's just like, oh wow, look at this beautiful woman. Oh, she's having a little adventure and she wants to be a singer. And then the next time it's oh, here she is auditioning to be the singer. Oh, and she's doing well. And then by the third time it's like, oh, this is a burlesque show and she's in the background not really singing at all. It's like, oh yeah, it takes that arc immediately into like what you're describing, where it's like, oh, this was not going to be the dream that she thought it was going to be, but she didn't know it was also going to turn into the nightmare that it turned into.
Right. And even her perception of Sandy, I feel like, kind of is through these like rose-colored glasses, where it's like she's like, oh yeah, Sandy's like, at first she thinks she's like this great beauty and stuff, and she starts making her own hair look like it, which as much as Thomasin McKenzie is a beautiful young woman, I don't think that blonde look would look nearly as good on her. And then she starts being like, okay, like she's obviously this tortured woman, and she thinks she's this murder victim and stuff like that. And you have this whole great side plot with Terrence Stamp, where she thinks Terrence Stamp was the murderer, but then he turns out to have been, the cop and Sam Claflin. And I love that whole reversal. But he kind of warns her, it's like, she's not what you think. Like, Sandy is not this, like, angel that you think or whatever. And she realizes that, like, like these guys that she was murdering were not good dudes at all, but that she was like this mass murderer and just going on this killing spree, killing all these dudes, and kind of has no real qualms about killing Sandy or killing Ellie, as well as her friend. And it's only in like her last moment that she's kind of like, I guess I'm not gonna murder you. But yeah, Sandy is kind of becomes, because of all this horrible stuff that she went through in this horrible life, because, once again, we said the swing 60s in London, not what we were thinking. She kind of becomes this twisted, dark version of herself too, played brilliantly as Diana Rigg in her last ever performance. I believe she passed away right after this, that filming of this. So yeah, I thought that was a very, very clever subversion as well.
I think what you're touching on there is what pissed a lot of people off.
Okay, yeah.
Is the twist in the story is what made as far as I can tell, I've read a lot of reviews where I'm like, why do people not like this? And it's the twist, which is that everything that you thought that Ellie was solving a cold case murder with her psychic abilities. And it turns out that the woman that she thought was the victim is actually the perpetrator of the killings. And so she did solve like 50 murders.
Yeah.
But it was all for like men that were perhaps taking advantage of a woman who was, she was some kind of a sex worker, but perhaps not of her own volition. So right. that's where there's kind of some, perhaps it was justified, all this killing that she did. But yeah, I think when the movie goes into that, in that last act, that last like 20 or so minutes, I think that rules too. Like the way that visually they show Sandy killing all those guys is like, this is really cool. Like you said, it was marketed as a horror, and it's like, that's when it really dials up the horror.
Yeah, those scenes are like really like, and I love that it has that very Edgar Wright style, where it's very locked in, where you see the knife, like Ellie's eyes kind of reflected in the knife stabbing, and the first time you see that is when you think it's Sandy that's being stabbed, but then you see the reversal, and it's just kind of it's all set up and paid off so well, in a way that feels perfect for an Edgar Wright movie.
And those visuals are kind of borrowing from like a giallo, like
Yes,
a
absolutely.
Suspiria, the strong use of color, the
A
eyes
lot of
and the
bisexual
knife.
lighting in this movie.
Yes, a lot of bisexual lighting, but also just great lighting in general. Like
Mhm.
really strong like moments where the light is signifying that something is happening or someone is approaching or danger is near,
Mhm.
which is very fun because when the blinking light outside of her apartment is first introduced, it's not ominous and it
Right.
becomes ominous.
Yeah. Wright is, I feel like, just kind of the master of setup and payoff,
Mhm.
where he will like introduce something that you don't even know is important, and it'll like pay off, or you'll know it's important, and it'll pay off in a way that you did not expect at all later on, and that's very apparent. I feel like in a lot of his movies where he uses that for comedic effect, like in Shaun of the Dead, where
Yeah.
something that will happen normally will happen then during a zombie apocalypse, and they're like, oh, that's really funny, you set that up. But he does that in this really well too. And a good example one I was thinking of is there's at the party where Jocasta, who, side note, is one of my least favorite characters in any movie ever. Like, I was almost kind of like disappointed she didn't get stabbed by scissors, but
Yeah, she was so close.
she was so close. We were so close. But when she kind of like gives her the drinks, and it's kind of like, oh, is this like a spiked drink? And then the police officers like say something like, oh, did you get like, did someone give you a drink? Was that put in the drink? And then of course that comes back when older Sandy gives her the tea, and it's
Yeah.
like, oh, that's where the spiked drink is. It paid off in a way we were not even expecting. And there's so much little stuff like that throughout the movie that is such clever writing. And we just, as we're talking now, the most recent Mission Impossible movie, say that films that it just is the complete opposite of this, where it's like, let's shoot some cool shit. We'll put something on a plane in a submarine and then we'll stitch it together. Whereas this is like an intricate clock that's just been set up by Wright, where it's like, no, every bit of this script, he writes the screenplay and he also directs it, and it's so you can't take one thing out because the whole thing will collapse, and it's so intricately made, and everything is that we did this in Act 1, so now you're going to see why it's important in Act 3.
I do want to make sure we give credit to Christy Wilson Cairns, who was a co-writer on
Yes, good point.
Last Night in Soho. She also did 1917. Like
Yeah.
and I think obviously the right sensibility comes through and what you're talking about. But I from what I've read, it seems like she brought a real voice to Sandy. That I was like, oh yeah, I can really see if she didn't have like a strong presence, we would feel differently about that character. And I did like having that kind of fleshed out more, the backstory. But yeah, it's truly, yeah, it's very well written. I don't know. I think it's so funny that I feel like I'm defending it, but we're both like, yeah, this is great.
Right.
I'm defending it from the invisible reviewer that I know is out there.
The reviewer, or like the fact that this movie like made like half of its budget, like, which is wild to me. Like, and it wasn't even, I mean, we talked about mid-budget movies. This is a mid-budget movie, but it couldn't even make that back.
And it did come out. It was a post-COVID. It was delayed due to COVID.
It was like right as we were starting to be like, do we take our masks off yet, or what's going on?
Yeah, so I think that probably affected it just a bit. But yeah, I mean, and here's the thing: this is an original story. People want to say, "Oh, I'm tired of all the remakes and the sequels," and I know I'll watch every remake that comes out because that's just what I do. But I enjoy seeing an original story like this. Like this is, and it's clearly, I think it comes from someone who loves movies. Like this is like from a love of a certain kind of movie. This is as much as it is about the perils of nostalgia, it's also like looking at the kinds of movies that would be told about Sandy from the 60s. Edgar Wright had said in interviews that he was inspired by these, several 1960s movies, that the plot of it basically is a woman comes to London and regrets it. And that's kind of what's going on in this movie, but with a modern sensibility, with a way of looking at it and going, how is that handled now? How do we look back at it differently?
Yeah, and this movie obviously, in the same way that it calls back to this nostalgic music of the 60s, it does the same thing with the movies, both indirectly, like, we're saying with the plots that it was referencing, but directly it straight up kind of like shouts out a couple movies, like especially the James Bond franchise, right? Like when Ellie first like walks into the past Soho, she sees a matinee for Thunderball. Obviously, Diana Rigg is a Bond girl. And Anya Taylor-Joy looks like she would be a Bond girl. And I do want to say, to something you were talking about earlier, and how they brought in, is it Christy Wilson Carnes? Is that, am I pronouncing there? Okay.
I believe so.
Okay, how she, was brought on to bring a voice to Sandy, because Sandy does feel like a very complex and interesting character, and why at some points in the film we're able to really relate to her, and some points we're scared for her, and some points we're like, oh, actually you're a murderer, cool. So she is very interesting and dynamic, and this feels like a very feminist film. And if you're just getting Edgar Wright's point of view, that would be a little less, I don't know, I don't want to say genuine necessarily, but it's always good to have someone who has actually lived that life, because I feel like so much of this movie is, just straight up being a woman in the world, whether that's in the 1960s or in 2021, is kind of like living through a horror film. And it might have been worse then, but it's still not necessarily good now. And it reminds me of Max Fury Road, how that gets all the, is very feminist, and because George Miller brought on the author of the Vagina Monologues, it's always good to have that voice, I feel like, brought in, and to your point, I think it was very effective in this film.
I also wonder if that comes into play. I mean, it must come into play when you look at how Baby Driver did and how this film did, where Baby Driver, the main character, is a young white man. And it's one of those situations where, when with any film where a protagonist is a woman, people will dissect it more. They'll give it harsher reviews. They'll say, is it authentic enough?
Right.
Is it this? Is it it's too woke? Like all these things come up, but of course, when it's a young white man as the protagonist, it's like, oh, this is the greatest movie ever. You look at I'll say the same thing with Scott Pilgrim. Like, the kind of the point of the Scott Pilgrim comics was that Scott Pilgrim is not a good guy.
Yes.
It's kind of funny that it's like who they cast as Scott Pilgrim in the movie is like the most innocuous man in Hollywood. So, it is kind of like, okay, we're playing up that angle of like, the men are innocent, but it's like, are they? No. That's what Last Night in Soho is about. Is that the men are not innocent, but neither is Sandy. Sandy murdered them. Like, you can't, as much as whatever they did to her, it's like that wasn't the right response. And I think part of what works in the script as well is that Ellie is always trying to save Sandy, even at the end. Yeah. Even at the very end, when Sandy says, I can't make it out of the burning house. And Ellie's like, that's not the end. Like, come on, you can get out. We can get you out. And she just accepts her fate. Like, it's truly like it's not just to show how good Ellie is as a person. It is to show like their connection throughout this entire movie is that she wanted to save Sandy. And even if she couldn't save her in the past, she'll save her in the present. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think, that dynamic between the two of them, even though it is like a often one-sided dynamic, because it's just kind of Ellie watching her through the mirrors or through, whatever the devices that she's seeing her through dreaming, you do really feel that she cares deeply, deeply about this person. And even when she's like just tried to murder her essentially, and she still is trying to save her. And, I jokingly brought up the bisexual lighting before, but I think that there are definitely some of those themes present in this movie, because I don't know if you've ever heard the term wife goals or life goals, but it's something that is, for people who aren't aware, when like a queer woman sees another queer woman and she's like, do I want to be her or do I want to be with her? And I feel
Oh.
like that is kind of the lens that Ellie is looking at Sandy, where she's like, okay, cool. Like, I kind of want to be her, but like, so I'm like being a fashion designer and designing these robes to look like her and dyeing my hair exactly like her. But I think maybe there's a little bit of a crush there too. So I do really feel that a little bit in this movie.
That is so funny. Have you seen the film When Marnie Was There?
I have not seen it. That's an anime, right?
Yes, that is it's a Studio Ghibli. I
Okay,
can't
yeah.
remember the
I
name
know
of
it's not a
the.
Miyazaki, but I knew
It's
it was
not a
Ghibli.
Miyazaki, but yeah, it's a
Yeah.
Ghibli, and that movie has that, and it suffers for it. Like it is truly like one of those where you're like you're exactly what you're describing. It's like one character is like, do I want to be her or be with her? And then the way the movie ends, you're like, oh, that was we didn't want that. Like, it's just
Yeah.
like it just ends in such a disappointing way. But it's I like that is a funny phrasing of it. You know, I didn't consider that for this movie, but I guess I can kind of see it. I'm not, you know, against it necessarily, but it is. Yeah, I guess she does. I mean, because she does mirror her, which I think mirrors are like a big symbol in this movie. Even before the mirror is how they switch places, essentially.
Mhm.
There's a couple of mirrored shots that I think Edgar Wright is playing with to get the audience ready for that kind of like symmetry that will be going on. Because there's the earlier, before she even has the dream, Ellie's in the bathroom, and when she overhears the Mean Girls talking about her, that's kind of like a symmetrical mirrored shot going on there. So I feel like it is like mirrors are very important. And so like the fact that Ellie dyes her hair and then dresses like Sandy and then kind of like begins investigating her and caring about what her journey was is just her like she sees herself in someone that has lived literally in the apartment that she's in before.
Right. And she still has her old mirror in there, like back when, you know, Sandy lived in there, and that mirror, of course, gets smashed, and you know that becomes a big thing. And yeah, there's so, like you said, there's so much of this movie that is in mirrors. Obviously, when she kind of first gets introduced, you see first Ellie walks in, and then it shows like cuts to like the mirror shot of Ellie, and then it kind of pulls back, and then it's Sandy, and she does the little thing that was in all the trailers where she like kind of taps the mirror with one of her fingers.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot, you know, coming down the stairs, and I was like blown away by how, like, that's what Edgar Wright will do, right? Is he will take these things that just on a filmmaking level are so fucking cool. Like, I just think about that shot of her descending the stairs and Sandy kind of looking at her, and then of course it all builds up to when, what's his name? I was gonna say Sam Claflin / Terrence Stamp.
Yeah.
His character kind of, as the young one, he sees him, and he's like trying to get Sandy out of this, and she smashes the mirror and grabs her. All that mirror stuff is so cool. So I would love to hear your thoughts about, you know, the metaphors and everything behind that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes through. I mean, that scene you're describing, what he says, "Oh, look at yourself in the mirror," and that's where Ellie like realizes like, oh, maybe I can communicate with her. Maybe if I can get her to look in the mirror and see me, you know, because there were other earlier scenes where she was going to comfort her, like she touched her shoulder and then she woke up immediately. And so in this scene where she's trying to get her to look through the mirror, she's pounding on the mirror and it's cracking. And when she finally breaks through, she holds her like in a tender friend way, and then the dream is over. But it's even in the final sequence when the ghosts are coming out of the walls, the way that the walls are cracking are mirror like. It's not like wood or anything. Like it really the cracking of the mirror. And then I mean, even when she breaks the mirror and she tells her landlady, "Oh, sorry about the mirror, I'll fix it." And she goes, "Oh, we all have to pay for a broken mirror." Which is kind of like the idea of it's bad luck to break a mirror, right? Like,
Yeah.
So it's kind of like by breaking through the mirror, you know, is Ellie dooming herself? Is that the bad luck that she's taking on by being involved with Sandy? Like I I think it, it kind of goes back and forth through the film what the mirrors mean, but the fact that the imagery is consistent, I like that a lot.
Yeah, and we haven't even really touched on, her mom, and that's like another thing that is, she's kind of has this nostalgia for her mother who committed suicide, and because her mother was a fashion designer, and whenever she sees her mom, like we see her seeing her mom before she sees any of this stuff in the 60s. Like, so we know that either we're not sure if she's like kind of like is she a little is she not all there, or is it like she actually is legitimately like seeing the ghost of her mother, and then she starts to see all these other things and stuff, and you realize, okay, probably there's something more there, that she's able to reach out into the past. But whenever she sees her mom, it's unless I'm wrong, it's always in a mirror. And so they set that up right from the beginning, and then that's also the last shot of the movie, where it's kind of like, okay, the house burned down, and we get like a nice little happy ending, and she's got her fashion show, and then her new boyfriend is there, and her grandma's there, and all right, she's moved on from, like, she's still got the nostalgia, but it's in a new kind of more healthy way. But then it's like, she still sees her dead mom. So what does that mean? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? We don't know. It's kind of that classic. You got, ever since Carrie, I feel like you got to end your horror movie with like a last little thing, So what did you think about that? Yeah.
Yeah. It ends with Sandy in the mirror.
Oh,
and,
right. Yeah.
Yeah. After the mom goes, then she looks back in the mirror and there's Sandy. And what Ellie does is she taps the mirror like Sandy did at the beginning, which is almost, it's that idea of like, and now I'm done with you. Like Sandy comes into her life by tapping the mirror, and then she is like, and now I'm done. Like, I'm going to tap you and be done. Like, I think that's so like, like you're saying with Carrie, like, and I think definitely there is a De Palma-esque nature to this story.
Okay.
With the twists and with the with the murder, it's really like it comes through in a and even like it's less of a horror and more of a like psychological angle where you don't know what to trust, what's real, what is she seeing, what is she not seeing, and especially when she's about to stab her former roommate. It's like she thinks she's about to stab a ghost, so it's like she can't even trust what she's seeing. That's a very De Palma like paranoia angle. That's a big thing in a lot of De Palma movies. But yeah, Carrie's a good touch point too because of the psychic abilities. I always read it as Ellie has psychic abilities, and they mostly manifest with her mom because that's who she was close to and who she lost.
Right.
And now going into this house, when she sleeps in a room full of dead bodies, it's like it reawakens the psychic ability in a stronger way, where she's going to see the story of how these bodies came to be in the floorboards, of this house.
Yeah, which is I love that they never like explicitly, they don't have a scene where they're like, well, the reason you're seeing these ghosts is that you saw your mom is because you had a connection with her. But now that you're like, they don't ever like spell it out like that. Like, it's just classic Edgar Wright of showing, not telling, and having these like spooky ghosts. Like, yeah, these there's dead bodies in the floorboards and the walls and stuff like that. I wonder, like, and that's another thing too. Like, she mentions the garlic, so it's like, did she covering up the smell of these bodies with just like the garlic and stuff like that? That's another little touch that I love. But I love the design of those ghosts when she starts seeing them, because they're not like crazy monsters or something like that. They're not like overtly like scary things. They're just like these faceless, creepy entities, which I think is almost always one of the scariest things, is just like kind of this bland thing coming for you. That's why Michael Myers with that like William Shatner mask is so scary. That's why Jason, when he wears the hockey mask, is way scarier than when he's like gets it knocked off or anything. And to touch back to another horror franchise, because we're talking about She's Afraid to Go to Sleep, I think there's definitely some Nightmare on Elm Street DNA in this too. So I really loved just like the unnerving design of all of the horror in this, because it's like a De Palma, like you said. Everything feels a little bit off, and you're just kind of like, this isn't right. Something is wrong here, and it's making me uneasy. And I like movies that instead of just making me have a jump scare, they make me feel like something is just 2 degrees wrong the whole time.
Hmm. And at any moment you don't know. It's like, is she going to be having one of these visions? Like these visions
Right.
can pop up at any time. They happen when she was at school. They happen when she's at home. They happen, it's she's never really safe, but she's trying to live her life, and so it's just going to happen at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, like I said, it's just something that kind of it's slowly like it's first it starts when she's just like dreaming, but then it starts creeping into her daily life. She'll just see a glimpse of it, and by the end of this whole ordeal, it's like waking nightmares all around her, which
Hmm.
I thought was really fantastic. But yeah, man, I mean, like I guess we've talked about like a lot of specific things. We talked about why it was underrated. Do you have any just like big overarching other thoughts about the movie?
Well, I think also the cast, we talked a little bit about the cast,
Hmm.
but I think this is really Anya Taylor-Joy right as she's rising as a
Yeah.
star. Like this is, I believe Edgar Wright saw The Witch when it was at Cannes or something, and he was like, oh, I want to work with her. She's really good. And then Thomas and Mackenzie was in some, I can't remember the name of it, but it was an indie movie that got a lot of
Oh,
acclaim.
yeah, it was Jojo Rabbit.
Oh, right. Yeah, there was that. And yeah, there was something, I thought there was something else too that was right before that. But yeah, it was Edgar Wright was like casting these young stars as they're coming
Mm.
up. And now Anya Taylor-Joy's in so many different things. I mean, you mentioned Mad Max, and she's Furiosa. Like it's
Yeah, yeah.
everything's coming around. And then, you know, here's the thing I'm going to say. I'm going to say it about Matt Smith.
Okay.
I don't care for him as an actor.
Fair.
I mean, and honestly, maybe I'm a little biased because he replaced David Tennant as Doctor Who, and I never liked that. And I never liked his version of the Doctor. But you know what? I think he plays this role extremely well.
Yeah.
It's truly like he fits so well as like a slimy 1960s guy. And so it's this movie's like well cast.
Mm.
Even like her friend from school that is very helpful and nice to her. The actor is Michael Zhao.
Mm.
He was in Attack the Block,
Oh yeah, a
and
movie I covered way back in the day.
yeah, which is like that's another like kind of yeah, totally underrated. Like people
Mm.
really slept on that and continue to honestly.
Yes.
And it's like one of those things where it's like I love that Edgar Wright is like picking these people where he's like, yeah, I can see that you're coming up. I can see that you're really good. And even like Matt Smith, it's like he must have had that vision of like, you can be a slime ball. Like I know that people know you right now because you're the Doctor, the nicest alien being in existence, but
Right.
you can be a slime ball. Let's have some fun with that. But yeah, I mean, because look, Matt Smith is in like Morbius. Like, come on, this guy doesn't know. I don't know if he's picking bad on purpose or what. He was in I never saw the Terminator that he was in.
It's not
Yeah,
good. It's really
right.
bad.
There's no way that was good. So it's just one of those like, what? I don't know what Matt Smith is doing, but here, perfect. Love him.
He's really good, and it's great because like he starts out with like, oh, he's just kind of this like guy, like this like sleek like guy who seems like a charming guy, but then you really quickly are like, this guy is sleazy and terrible. And the way he's able to kind of like turn that, I think, is really interesting because it mirrors what you think is going to be what you think of his like older character, what you think is his older character.
Mhm.
When the twist is, of course, that he's not. Where you have Terrence Stamp, he seems like he's this slimy guy. They're like, oh, there's Hands of the Octopus, but then it turns out, and he's like, I was protecting the girls, and you're like, creepy. But then you find out, like, oh no, this was a guy who was like actually trying to rescue sex workers, who are being abused in Soho. Like, and he might have still been like a creepy ladies' man, but he's actually like a pretty cool dude. And I think Stamp, he's one of my favorite actors. He's so good in this as just like this guy who was like a ladies' man in the 60s and now is past his prime, but he's still just like, all right, I'm out here. Let me But on the other, I was a really big fan of his in this movie.
Yeah, I think, and he, he dials it up. I think he knows to dial it up a little bit
Yeah.
in this, but I think it works. I think it works.
Yeah.
And even to the, I like that before you get to the Sandy twist, you have this twist where he's not who you think he is. So it's the idea of like, even Ellie is experiencing the past in some form, but even she doesn't know who she's looking at, like all the time. Like it's kind of fascinating.
Yeah, and I think it once again speaks to that point of, you think you understand the past, you think you understand this nostalgia, but you really don't, and you're getting all these things wrong. I think that was really well done. But yeah, any final thoughts here on Last Night in Soho?
No, I wish more people would see it and kind of allow it to wash over them. I think people were very in their heads when they were watching this movie in theaters for the first time. I think, there's so many movies that come out and that I see where honestly they look terrible. The editing's bad, the lighting's bad, and it has a whatever story, and people are like, "Oh, that was good." And then this comes out and it's like beautifully put together, a lot of care put into it, the casting, the acting, the look. They use a lot of, with all these mirror shots, they're doing practical effects throughout the whole thing instead of CGI. And everybody comes out saying, "Oh, this is saying something bad about women or about sex workers." And I'm like, I don't think it's trying to say that. I think it's one specific story in the style of a 60s, 70s dark thriller, like I don't think it's trying to make a sweeping, like Edgar Wright's not making his his thesis statement about humanity in this movie. I think he's just making a stylistic horror movie.
Yeah, I would very much agree with all that, because it's one of those things where it's like, I see why you could have that interpretation, but I think you're missing something and I don't agree. Because it's like smart people that I know have like really disliked this movie, but I'm like, I think you're just, the interpretation you have is not misunderstanding some of these beats. And I see how you could, because it is a subtle movie, like we talked about, in a lot of ways, but yeah, like also just visually gorgeous and just immaculate to look at, and a movie that you could, even though it's so musically driven, it's something you could watch on mute and still be like, this is one of the coolest things I've ever seen.
Yeah. I think for me, I'm looking towards Edgar Wright his next film is actually a remake of The Running Man.
Wait, he's doing? I knew that was getting remade with Glenn Powell. Yes. I didn't even put
Glenn
together
Powell.
that was. Oh my god, dude.
So yeah,
okay.
I think we shall see how people react to that movie, and might prove my kind of theory correct about when you got a white man in the lead. It's like, oh yeah, we're gonna give this all the passes in the world. Like,
yeah,
it's kind of I hope he brings something really fun to it, because I don't know if you've read The Running Man. It's a short story, I believe.
I haven't. I hear that Wright's version is going to be a lot closer to that than this.
I'm so excited, and it has the rest of the cast that I heard announced. I remember being excited for. So I think I think he's really going to have something special there.
On WhatsApp, no one can see or hear your personal messages, whether it's a voice call, message, or sending a password. To WhatsApp, it's all just this. So whether you're sharing the streaming password in the family chat or trading those late-night voice messages that could basically become a podcast, your personal messages stay between you, your friends, and your family. No one else. Not even us. WhatsApp. Message privately with everyone.
When you wanna grow your list size, pop up like it's hot, pop up like it's hot, pop up like it's hot. And when you gotta boost your revenue, pop up like it's hot, hey, pop up like it's hot, pop up like it's hot. Pick your favorite template, you can tailor to your brand. They're MailChimp-erific, you're gonna be a fan. MailChimp your marketing with our new customizable pop-ups.
Okay, yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that. Yeah, because like I said, I'm a big Edgar Wright fan, and that leads me into my last question, because a lot of times I like to end these shows with just kind of a question that's not necessarily about the movie, but might be related in a little bit of a way. And as we talked about Wright and his distinctive style, and him, with Running Man working on a known property, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on, and what you think this movie would have ended up being if he would have been able to do his version of Ant-Man, which obviously got pretty far into production. Eventually, he had kind of a falling out with Marvel. That movie ended up going ahead with some undisclosed part of it directed by him, and Peyton Reed finished it. But now, a big part of the reason that movie didn't get made is because it didn't fit into the formula that Marvel was making at the time. But now that Marvel is able to do their multiverse shit, and we're seeing, it's coming out very soon from when this episode is dropping, Fantastic Four, which seems, for Fantastic Four's first steps, I should say, which seems much more in line of like, hey, what he wanted to do with Ant-Man, where it's like, in some ways, what Last Night in Soho did, where it's like, this is a 1960s inspired thing, where like his Ant-Man would have taken place in the 60s in this kind of retro futuristic version, that reminiscent of the Marvel comics from that time period. And that's exactly what the Fantastic Four is doing. And it's like, if he had just gotten to make his Ant-Man movie a decade later, would he have actually been able to make what he wanted? And what would that have looked like, do you think?
Wow. Yeah, that is a big question.
Yeah, it is. This is a big one to drop on you. But I've been thinking about it.
I've thought about, I wish he did, at least I wish the script they would have kept, even if they didn't let him direct Ant-Man. But it's certainly, if he's doing that retro style, I mean, it's Hank Pym in the 60s, which is, I mean, they'd have to cast some younger actor to play, young Michael Douglas or right, some version of that character, I guess, in a similar vein. But that would be a lot of fun to see that Ant-Man and the Wasp. I know in the comics, Hank Pym is kind of an asshole, but
yeah, that's an understatement.
I think with the World's End, we've seen an Edgar Wright character who was like a full-on asshole. Like that's that's kind of in that vein of like, why is everyone gathering around this guy? And it's like, well, because they used to like him, like they have some form of affection for their friendship, when they were younger. I think that would maybe be the blueprint that we'd be looking at. Like he gets together with people that used to like him, and now maybe they're all super powered now,
Yeah. That would have been interesting.
That is a fun thought. The other one that I think about a lot is right after Baby Driver, the word was he was just going to make a sequel right away. And I'm so curious what that would look like. And I think as more time goes on, the timeline would fit better because of the way that Baby Driver ends. But also with Ansel Elgort got into some trouble. I don't know if it was exactly legal trouble, but it was certainly he was accused of things. And that really that was, I went and saw West Side Story, and he was kind of the worst part of it. So I was like, they should have, I wish they got someone else for that, because that really, I was like, God, I hate that I'm watching this guy right now when all this accusations is going around. I'm like, oh my God. Baby Driver 2 is the one that I think about more than his Ant-Man. But yeah, I if he did a 60s Ant-Man, I think he could have really had something unique as far as Marvel was looking for. And it's a shame that Marvel does want, it has to be by the numbers to some extent, because it's not just the one film. They're fitting it into like a whole tapestry of story that takes years and years to tell.
Which is like why I'm kind of like, now that they are able to do these multiverse things and they're able to tell these other different stories that don't necessarily have to fit into the overarching phase whatever narrative, I'm kind of always interested, when they do that kind of stuff. So I'm very cautiously optimistic about Fantastic Four. But the Wright Ant-Man movie is one of those great kind of, for me at least, what if movies that so often we never get to see. Every once in a while we actually get to see them, and Francis Ford Coppola will make his Megalopolis, and you're like, this is what you've been trying to make for 50 years? Okay, dude, like that was
that was rough.
So you never know with these things. Sometimes those movies don't get made for a reason, but I think this would have been a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a
But
shame.
Andrew, yeah, thank you so much for coming on. This was a blast. Like we said, anybody out there listening, next week, if you are, or a week and a half from when this episode drops, if you are going to Comic-Con, we would love to for you to come see us. We're going to be at the Neil Morgan Auditorium at the San Diego Central Library right there at Comic-Con. You need a Comic-Con band to get in. And we're going to be talking about the value of a director's cut. You, me, and a few other great panelists are going to be discussing this, so I'm very excited for that. But, other than that, you mentioned your podcast, Nothing New. Where can people listen to that?
Yeah, wherever you get your podcast. We're also on YouTube, and there's some little exclusive clips that you'll only find on YouTube Shorts or even Instagram Reels. So be sure to follow us on Instagram and on YouTube at Nothing New Pod on all those. And you can follow me personally at Podcaster Andrew on Instagram, Threads. I still have my Twitter. I should delete that, right? I still call it Twitter. That's the other thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's like the ultimate litmus test is what do you call this thing? You call it Twitter, you're cool. Oh, do you call it something else? Oh, you're not that cool. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and same for me, obviously, Underrated Movie Podcast on Blue Sky and Instagram and still on Twitter, but I never update it anymore. But you can find all that stuff there. You can also find my writing on places like watchmojo.com, or just go to Underrated Movie Podcast for links to all the stuff. Also, check me out on the Midnight Film Society, which is another podcast where I'm the co-host. And then Underrated also has a Patreon. If you want to get these episodes a week early and ad-free, you can sign up there for as little as $1. If you sign up for $3, you can also get a whole bonus podcast where I talk about films that were released in 2D and see how they hold up in 3D. That series is going to be wrapping up soon, but I talked about a lot of good stuff there. And on that podcast, I'm also going to be launching a retrospective, a mini-series called the Leica Retrospective, where I'm going to be looking at all of the Leica films coming up here. That's going to be starting soon here. Going to be starting with Coraline on Across the Second Dimension, which will also get that's going to be the one episode that gets released on the main feed, so look forward to that. And then the other 4 Leica films I'm going to be releasing here on Underrated. So I'm going to be talking about all 5 Leica movies coming up, so everybody look forward to that. Also on YouTube, all those places. One more time, Andrew, thank you so much for coming on and talking last night in Soho with me. This was a total blast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is truly a great film.
A hard agree. Yeah. All right, bye, everybody.